Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to the session on power shift and why we need to wean our food systems off fossil fuels. My name is Patty Fong from the Global Alliance for the Future Food, and we're going to have two amazing panels today to talk about this intersection between food and energy. But first, let me give you a bit of introduction to the work and why we're having this session. So, about a year ago, we knew that this COP will be hosted in UAE. It's a petrostate. We knew that food systems would be high on the political agenda, and we wanted to support the agenda. The first time that food systems was a political priority amongst countries, but we also knew that the phase out of fossil fuels should also be a political priority, and we didn't want food systems to and that focus to deflect from the way away from the need to also phase out of fossil fuels. So we commissioned this work to better understand how food and energy systems intersect with one another. We've already had some bits of knowledge, things like cold chain, fossil fuel based agrochemicals. There's energies used, but like to what extent and what are those connections look like? Um, and so, thank you. We wanted to come out with some key messages coming into COP to really show, well, what are those interconnections and what are those opportunities for working together? If we're actually trying to address climate change, whether it's for food or for energy, they shouldn't be siloed strategies. Actually, it's much better if we integrate and we work together. We prevent unintended consequences. And actually, if we look at the issues more holistically, we can actually capture more benefits and by working with communities to understand what are their challenges and identify creative solutions. So what do we find? First, that the two systems, food and energy, are intertwined, and that actually, if you want to transform food systems, you have to phase out of fossil fuels. If you want to phase out of fossil fuels, you have to transform food systems. You can't do one without the other. And on Friday, on December 1st, there was a leaders' declaration on food and agriculture, which we support, but there is no mention of fossil fuels. Very little on emissions, really focused on adaptation. The good news is that there is a hook on countries that have committed, so 134 countries committing to updating their national climate plans, their NDCs, and national adaptation plans to include food and agriculture in the next round that's due by 2025. But we need to do much more. That when we did an assessment, we created an assessment of actually how do you integrate food and agriculture into your NDCs, and we published this a couple years ago. And we did a deep dive into a number of countries to understand, well, how are they looking at food systems, if at all? And most weren't. And if they did, it was quite specific. It wouldn't take a holistic approach. And actually, many countries did have policies and programs, but they didn't consider it climate action. So many countries are actually doing work in this space, but if they actually thought about those interactions, it on food, on health, on access, food security, it would also have climate co-benefits if designed in the right way. We also looked at last year how much, even though food systems account for a third of global greenhouse gas emissions, we found that only 3% of climate finance goes to food systems. And why is that? It's because most countries aren't prioritizing food. So if you're not actually thinking about how to transform your food systems, you're not going to be able to access climate finance. So that's number one. And we found that nearly three-quarters of the NDCs they didn't have, as of last year, didn't go into enough detail on the programs, on the policies, to be able to link closely enough to what types of finance would they need and how much would they need. So when we in this year's report, we looked at not only the interconnections, but we looked at the fossil fuel dependency of food systems. And we found that at least 15% of fossil fuels used annually are used by food systems. And this is a very conservative estimate, which is why we say at least, because there actually isn't a full global number for fossil fuels. We had to take estimates from different major regions of the world None of them actually took in the full impact of food systems in their economies. And so this is actually a gap that we need to go into much further to really understand the interactions and the use. We also found that food systems, especially global industrial food systems, are highly energy intensive, and they're increasing in their energy intensiveness as there is more processing and packaging of foods, ultra processed foods, which are bad for health, transporting around the world, um, retailing, all the mechanization that's involved, demand for meat and dairy, for ultra processed foods, as well as to some extent new food trends like alternative proteins. But food systems are not only consumers of energy, they're also producers of energy. So you have competition for land, right? So you can use land to produce for crops, for food, for feed for animals, and for materials or feedstock for energy. And so energy has been ahead in terms of kind of the base for clean energy and biofuels, highly controversial. What is the role? There is some role for things like residual crops, crop residuals that you can use as feedstock. But a lot of the arable land is being used as feedstock for to meeting renewable energy targets. And so there's a lot of unintended consequences when we're targeting in a siloed way um, policies and measures to meet targets that aren't thinking about the interconnection across different sectors. And then we see that, we can see here the fossil fuel industry fighting against any type of agreement on a fossil fuel phase out. We see that they're expanding into the petrochemical sector. They're expanding into plastics, agrochemicals. The International Energy Agency predicts that they will um, they'll see an increase in this expansion through 2050, and much of that expansion of petrochemicals is going into fertilizers and plastics. But we have the solutions. So it's not just about decarbonizing an input like fertilizer. It's about wholesale changes in production practices so that we can reduce overall demand, energy demand, as well as address some of these other um, impacts in food systems. And then if we start to look at just what are the underlying drivers of why our food systems are not working and what's driving kind of a high carbon energy system, we look at it together and work in partnership with one another, we can address these solutions much more cheaply, much more holistically, and many more benefits for local communities. So this is in the report, but it's just to show you, we broke down the food systems into four parts of the value chain: input production, on farm, on land use, but it's fisheries, it's on land, it's for crop production, it's for meat and dairy, processing and packaging, retail consumption, and waste. And then on the bottom, you see that plastics throughout value chain, you see transport throughout the value chain, and then in blue, you see feedback loops. So you see connections that go back in through the form of biogas, biofuel, waste reuse. So as I mentioned, the energy intensity is increasing. Um, Currently, most of the energy use is actually downstream. So it is in processing and packaging, 42%. Um, Next highest is around the retailing and marketing and consumption. And this is where downstream food companies have a huge responsibility to be addressing the intensity of energy use in their food system. If you look at where most of us buy our foods, many of us, not most of us, supermarkets, the packaging that goes into it, the transport, the lifespan of those foods, all of that, what goes in that is all energy. And we can see that we're losing connection with local communities where our food is coming from, whole foods, which is a lot less energy intensive when you look at the big picture. But what I mentioned earlier, what is also worrying is this vested interest in fossil fuels. So they may see writing on the wall that, okay, well, as we start to decarbonize the energy system and electrify, we might see shifts or at least stabilization on transport, on energy consumption downstream, where we start to decarbonize the power grid. But where is there still demand? They say there's always still demand for oil and gas. And that's for plastics, that's for agrochemicals. It's the chemical sector where they're really looking at locking in the food systems and the dependency. And where we see the linkages, there are both positive and negative interactions. So you take, for example, biofuels, where for farmers, using residual crop waste can be for biofuel, can be a source of extra income, right? Or solar panels on farm provides renewable energy access. But if you have the wrong incentive systems, which are actually promoting monoculture production of corn, soy, which is highly intensive on hybrid seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, it's reinforcing an industrial system and taking away arable land that can be used for other types, more diversified and agroecological crop production. And in fact, harming local communities in terms of those impacts, both social, environmental, and economic. So where we see the impacts, we also looked at, we broke it down positive and negative according to environmental, social, and economic. And the impacts are falling mostly on producers and consumers. Profits on input productions and on processing and packaging. This is where the power is held in the system. In our work, we did we looked at who's already working in this space and just did a kind of a light, kind of indicative assessment of what types of initiatives are out there. And we also did interviews with about 30 different stakeholders from different regions of the world across different sectors to understand what the potential is for better collaboration. And we basically analyze it by where there's already a lot of stakeholders, initiatives, where there's fewer or none at all, and where there's room for collaboration in the near term. You could have actually some impact in the near term if we work together versus something that will take longer to do. Not to say that it shouldn't be prioritized, but it'll just take more effort. And then that top right quadrant is where we said high impact near term opportunities for better collaboration between those working on food and those working on energy. And this is my last slide. So as I mentioned, it's phasing out of fossil-based agrochemicals. And that's just doesn't mean that we should just decarbonize fertilizers and agrochemicals. It's really starting with looking at wholesale production practices and really shifting towards agroecological and regenerative practices because that reduces overall demand for these external inputs. And then you can look at, well, how do we fill that residual need? Rather than starting with the question is, what do we do about fertilizers? Second, we need to look at our food environments and make sure that it's providing access to minimally processed and plant-rich foods. Without this, you have to start to address demand at the same time that you're addressing supply on the production side. You also need to be supporting shifts to renewable energy for cooling, storage, for drying, for heating, for processing, for transport throughout the value chain. We also need to be reviewing fiscal policies that are incentivizing biogas and biofuel production. There are policies, as I mentioned, around biofuels, but also for biogas, which are locking in, sometimes intensive livestock production, which have other environmental impacts in terms of pollution, social and labor impacts. So if we only look at carbon or methane specifically, we're missing this bigger picture of what is causing not only problems we're seeing today on food systems, but also climate change more broadly. And we need to track and address corporate consolidation in agrochemical and food industry and look at how they are also working um, implicitly, explicitly, who knows, but with the fossil fuel industry. So we need to be looking at who are these actors with power in the system and what are their intentions. And throughout all of this, is making sure that we're elevating those working on the front lines, those most impacted, so that they have a say in the priorities, in identifying the challenges, and co-creating the solutions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Harish Handa from the Silco Foundation, to introduce our two panels.
Thanks so much, Bhai, for that a wonderful start to in, introduction or the nexus between food and energy. Just to give an introduction, my name is Harish. I belong to Selco Foundation, and while unfortunately we are known for solar, but our solar is just an enabler or a catalyst. For us, the end goal is health services, better practices in agriculture, livelihoods. And end result is not about solar panels and batteries. End result is better livelihoods and better health services. So, Perry, just to add to what you just said, our focus for has been in especially in the agri space in India or and elsewhere in the world is the two of the like a very typical example we give. There was a guy who came. There was a person who actually watches 3 or 4 houses next to our office, and we asked him. I asked him what did you do before? He said, nothing. I was in Assam, in northeast India, and what he was is, and why did he leave? He said, uh, 3 years of no rains, and I had to feed my kids. So, and he came to Bangalore to search to become a watchman. So, what we have classically done is de-skilled 8 generations of knowledge. 8 generations of knowledge has been de-skilled. If I could write a resume of his in LinkedIn, he's a rights breeding expert, right? So he has sold his land. The poor have actually lose their knowledge and lose and the two main assets, knowledge and land. We don't consider that what is happening to the poor is they are going backwards by in this whole concept of migration. We are not looking at the power of the poor's knowledge at all. We think they are migrants that are taking the boats or shifting to different countries. You are, and then what we are doing, we are skilling them to do jobs of watchmen or anything else. The world is de-skilling knowledge. We're not even recording the knowledge of these guys, and that is the biggest problem of climate. And we're not even how many of us actually record? And if there was a LinkedIn in Hindi or LinkedIn in Swahili or LinkedIn in any other language, don't you think that these guys would have all preferred? See, we are educationally racist in many ways, right? Because all of us, if did a PhD on sugarcane, we'll all be experts of sugarcane. A farmer doing 45 years of sugarcane will never be called an expert because he or she does not have a PhD. I think this has to change, and that's why we are using decentralized energy to actually make it inclusive. And more importantly, is not only technology and finance, but how do you make the thought process more inclusive that they are the experts, not patronizing them, making them as equal partners, right? With that, um, I would like to and I would like to apologize on my Indian accent. So when I pronounce the names wrong, let's blame it on my education. And a little bit also I'll change from our my Asian education system of how I do the moderation is if people really have something that you didn't disagreed with the panelists, just put one finger, and if you have a comment, just do two. Right. So because we are a small group, let's make it more fun in the morning. So it's a dedicated class, which is what we all like, rather than large classes, right? So can I invite Ms. Eran Banabari Love Theophilus from Nigeria, from Leke Development Foundation. Thank you, ma'am, for coming. Can I also invite Avril de Torres from the Philippines, from the Center of Energy Ecology and Development? Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I will take the mic. That's good. Right. Thanks. Balance it. So thank you. Could we start off with after what Paddy gave us this wonderful introduction on the food energy nexus and gave out two solutions. Just a couple of minutes, what your organization does, and then I'll deep dive into questions. Can we start with you?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My organization is SEED, the Center for Energy, Ecology, and Development. We're based in the Philippines, and we describe ourselves as think do organization. So as opposed to a think tank, because we conduct research specifically in partnership or to partner with communities and people's organizations for the advancement of three guiding principles: transformative energy, ecological justice, and people-centered development. And for the most part, we've worked on energy, but in recent years, as we appreciate more the nexus between food and energy, we're looking more into specifically food from the seas and protecting critical marine habitats.
Thank you.
My name is Ira Benabari Theophilus, and my organization is called Leken Development Foundation. Leken is actually an indigenous name that means good land. And so we're a grassroots advocacy organization. We advocate for frontline communities, especially communities in the Niger Delta of Nigeria that are experiencing crude oil spills on their lands that has claimed their lands and their waters. So we build their capacity on how to advocate, who to talk to, who to collaborate with, to amplify their voices. And we also work with some other communities experiencing um, coal mining in their communities that has also affected their agricultural practices. Yes, so basically that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if I go to Avril first, uh, you brought up a very important topic called in the fisheries that Philippines. I mean, it's the same issue whether the coastal India or Indonesia, right? We are talking about fisheries, but as even COVID showed, there are hardly any technologies right now which are like, for example, simple cold storages, right? Simple cold storages are super expensive, right? We solved the COVID problem in 3 years, but fishery problems takes enormous time to solve, right? What are your challenges? What have you seen that other countries can actually learn from?
Yes, that's actually something that we agree with. One of the things that we do in SEED is we partner with communities in um, putting up decentralized renewable energy systems. And for most of us, when we talk about these systems, we often think of them as providing electricity or for lighting alone. But something that makes these systems more resilient is if we use them for economic purposes, for livelihood. So we do have actually one project in partnership with a fisherfolk community in Negros Island, which is the renewable energy capital of the Philippines. Around 97% of their electricity comes from renewable energy. And that distributed solar PV system specifically, we wanted to put up for cold storage for the fisher folks. It's some of like a solution that's a proof of concept of what renewable energy can do for fisher folk communities. But if we talk about other challenges apart from technologies that can serve as solutions, fossil fuel is a major problem for fisher folk in the Philippines. We know that a lot of fossil fuel industries rely on seawater intake for cooling. So many of them in the Philippines are in coastal areas. And for the communities that we partner with, majority of these coastal areas are populated by fisher folk. So the challenge now is before we often talk about impacts to livelihood and to health, and now it's also impacts to food. This has become more evident this year because of a major oil spill that happened in February. Over 800,000 liters of industrial oil spilled in the Verde Island passage. And now, when we talk to our partners in coastal areas, they talk about how there's no fish to catch, or even if there's fish to catch, are they safe for consumption? And this is a major threat, and I can talk about it more later because there's massive plans for gas and LNG buildup in these areas, meaning that risks of more accidents like this are increasing.
I'm glad you brought that up because I would bring you in here, ma'am. Is that you have already gone through what she's telling is about to happen, right? And these are things that you're dealing. Can you give us a peek into what you're actually dealing with, the speed? How are you able to? I mean, if I were in that situation, I would be really frustrated and depressed, as if I have no solution. Right? You're fighting against the whole land is destroyed, acres of land. What I see, right? This is what she's saying is a futuristic going to happen. What have you seen, and what would you suggest that organizations like them could do to prevent this happening to them in the future?
First of all, what we're experiencing, of course, every year we have thousands of oil spills on our lands in the Niger Delta. And of course, that has affected agriculture, that has affected our rivers. We woke up one morning and we had thousands of dead fishes on at the shore of a river. And the farmers went to, sorry, I'm just trying to give little experiences. And our farmers went to the farm and started to notice shiny oils. They didn't know it was good oil. And then they started to experience low yields, low crop yields. That was the first stage. And then the next thing, the crops started to get rotted in the ground. So when they harvest, all the crops are rotted. And yeah, and then we started to experience both scarcity, hunger in the land. And so the food systems really need to transition or transform because we can't rely on energy sources that is detrimental to our health. Right now in the Niger Delta, what we eat is crude oil. The benzene in our water is 900 times above World Health Standard. So when we drink water, we perceive benzene. And so now our women are the rates of cancer in my village, in my church, for example, women battling with cancer, infertility is rising by the day because we are eating pollution. So the food systems can't be involved with um, an energy source that is killing us and is toxic to our health because we are a product of our environment. So I would say, please campaign against that. Phase out what however way, collaborate with however way you can to prevent that from because it's a disaster. The life expectancy right now in the Niger Delta is 41 years old. Years is that bad. So please, whatever you can do, stop that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that, giving us a picture. But you see, one thing I mean, in a sense, from organizations like you could do is we always think of how do you share best practices, right? And best practices is always tend in terms of good practices. But what happens is easily she could be the expert for her, right? But we don't collaborate. We talked about energy and agriculture, but she's looking at her as her future in many ways. She's 10 years more advanced in the crisis handling of what she's actually going through. The world in the civil society is actually not looking at that we've already gone through, and we always look at best practices. We don't look at what are the bad practices that the others can actually learn. That's also an expertise. And so in Celco, we do have this something called the failures conference, which we do every 2 years. And we don't want people to sugarcoat failures. And let's not call it learnings. So the question is, call it failures and call it failures and present on failures and how we have failed kind of thing. So this is, I'm glad both of you met and hopefully that they don't. And coming back now to, because I'm coming back to the solution side. Is there, for example, how have you diversified now? How do you go? You came from the energy side, right? Moment moment people from the food side tell you, okay, energy is not related, the challenges that we face, right? What do you mean energy for us, right? You're only on the solar panels and batteries, right? How are you making sure this is one solution in a country like Philippines? Yeah.
Well, for us, we've always talked about energy issues as something that's cross-cutting.
Right.
When we start talking about it in terms of power and technology and batteries, then it is something that becomes detached. Communities are affected. So we always try to laymanize and explain how this impacts their lives. But with the work that we do specifically in the Philippines, something that's more evidently felt by communities are, at least previously, was on health impacts and livelihood impacts. And they would say, it seems that we're getting sick more often, or we're getting these irritations in our skins, and et cetera, et cetera. But now, with the oil spill being the biggest environmental crisis that we're facing right now, in our shores, then we get to connect and it becomes an easier conversation with communities on how energy relates to food and the threat that we're facing, especially because the oil spill happened in the Verde Island Passage, or what we call VIP. Some of us are probably familiar with the Coral Triangle, where Philippines is one of the 6 countries comprising of the Coral Triangle, which is the global center of marine biodiversity. And there's a report that found that the center of marine shorefish biodiversity in the Coral Triangle is in the Philippines, and that's VIP.
Right.
That's where the oil spill happened, and that's where massive fossil gas and LNG build out is happening.
Mm.
So now what we call the Amazon of the oceans is threatened by fossil fuel expansion. And if we talk about solutions, we're also excited because we recently commissioned a report that's finally out, and it talks about a 1.5 future that's possible for the power sector. And it means phasing out gas uh, by 2040. And that's something that's economically feasible. That's something that we can do, and we don't have to threaten livelihoods, health, and food.
Thanks so much. And then if I come to you with the last question before I open up to the audience, what is now you given us a picture of what you're dealing with, right? Number one, what would you give us hope that when we come back for COP29, this should have been done? And what are you looking at solutions or suggestions that this should be done on a long term? One is COP29 and one is long term. What would you suggest?
Um, our organization, we actually focusing on women in the rural areas because they are disproportionately affected. And we've already started the project. We get engineers to teach rural women how to generate their energy, renewable energy. And of course, where we source for support and collaborations with the government, but it's a bit hard because there's no political will to push this. But we see that that's the only um, type of energy that is accessible for these rural women and safe for them and affordable for them. So now they don't have sources of livelihood anymore. So when we provide these renewable sources for them, it helps in their day-to-day activities. So what we're doing actually, we source for funding and by ourselves, we do not wait for the government. We do not wait for the little we can do. We get into these communities and impact as much lives as we can. So I hope that by next year's COP, when we're back, we would have been able to affect more lives by our collaborations, by God's grace. Sorry,
And long term?
long term, I'd want a scenario where our communities are powered by renewable energy. Um, yeah, and to phase out fossil fuels.
Can I ask the audience a couple of questions? Need more coffee? No, so because you have two excellent examples on from two diverse parts of the world. These are two bookends for us. I mean, if you look at the island nation, I mean, Philippines is on the edge of what do you call it as I will have one of the largest climate refugees if you look at in terms of the typhoons and cyclones that are hitting, and just to give an example, what we don't realize, like a lot of the fishing communities in and especially in Manila Bay, who are surviving And after one of the biggest typhoons hit 8 years ago, they were shifted 55 kilometers inwards with an aisle away housing. So you completely destroyed, and then said, let's train them in sewing machines and shoemaking. What are we? I mean, why are we treating poor as a piece of cheap labor? Rather than looking at their skill sets, how could have displays? So easy, and that, if you go, it was done by Don Bosco, and now some of these people are being also being trained to become guards of ministers, and so when we went to there, they're actually taught on machine guns and everything else. So question is, we need to realize that these are people at the center. It's not only solutions, fossil fuels, it's the people, 2 billion people whose knowledge. Would you think that tomorrow I say that, sorry, you need to work in the hospitality sector? Tomorrow, I'm sorry, you need to actually do something else, not your expertise. Why are we taking the poor for granted, right? And this is the biggest challenge that we all have to face with. Last comment from your side for the audience, and we have also an online audience that.
Um, I would say there's renewable energy all around us. It's beneath us, it's above us, it's everywhere. All we need is the CSOs and organizations are already, moving with the vision. All we need is the political will of nations and corporations, and we can get there.
Thank you. Yes. Last comments.
Maybe just the last point. Last 2 points. I think this report on power shift was very informative, and it really provides us a perspective on how people working in the food and energy sector can come together.
Right.
And I think this is something that we should start looking at. And hopefully we can start collaborations. In my country, I see how this is very important. Just to share, there is a UN report that said that nearly 51 Filipinos are suffering from moderate to severe food insecurity. That's the highest in Southeast Asia. And now we have plans to promote further fossil fuels, no phase out plans until 2050. And COP is an avenue, especially this COP, where we have a global stock take, to enhance ambitions and also to reimagine a different type of society for us, one that puts the interests and rights of people front and center.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you for doing this one. Excellent. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we have an. No. Oh, there. So can I invite our second panel, um, Obiliu Morevane from Botswana, sir. Thank you for coming, sir. Karina David from Brazil. Oh, hi. Come, come. Please. So we can be as provocative as we can. So please don't worry about it. Nobody's going to. Thanks so much for coming, and it's a wonderful segue to this second. We are missing one panelist, unfortunately, because of COVID, but I hope we can give justice to that. So, can I start with you, Will? Give a brief introduction of what you do.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Obule Murawan. I'm from the Republic of Botswana. I'm in the renewable energy sector as a practicing energy systems engineer, and I come from an NGO and association called Green Energy and Sustainability Association, which is an association that was founded by a group of young engineers and scientists to facilitate the development of renewable energy technologies in Botswana and the South African region. And by providing education, training, and capacity building around, the renewable energy technologies, their potential, and how they are designed, sized, and maintained. I also come from the private company called BioWatt Botswana, which is a renewable energy company that is providing, consultancy and renewable energy solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Karina. I'm an organic and agroforestry farmer from Brazil. And at local level, with Ecovida PGS network, that it's a kind of certification that we have in Brazil and other countries too. That is a participative certification. At the national level, I'm part of Instituto Brasil Orgânico, that is an institute that works to promote organic agriculture in Brazil. And at a international level, I'm part of Inofo, that it's a platform inside iPhone that works to promote organic agriculture too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So can I start with you? Because the challenge, you are the gatekeeper or the keeper of the world's lung, the Amazon, right? It's a lung. And why is lung? Because if anything happens in Amazon, and if you look at the trajectory, there's a change of monsoons in Congo and in India. And it's completely related. If you look at as deforestation increases in Amazon, you directly see an impact of monsoons in India. So we are all connected in many ways, right? But we are so enamored in our country boundaries, right? And so if there was a war from Mars, are we going to say the Brazilians have to fight first, Americans have to first fight, or the Indians have to fight first? It's the two wars that are happening, that's poverty and climate change, and we need to act as human beings. So organic farming, I'm sure you have enormous challenge in Brazil to push this cause. Uh, how are you doing those? Can you just give us a peek on those challenges? And I'll come to the solutions later on.
Okay. So in Brazil, we have a different kind of fossil fuels impact because normally at the global level, the fossil fuel are the largest problems about greenhouse gas emission. And in Brazil, 50% it's about greenhouse emission in deforestation. And one part of emission it's about fossil fuels. And in Brazil, 75% of greenhouse gas emission it's about food system production. It is divided by cow production and deforestation. That is relation between them. And sometimes people think that Amazon, Brazil, countries are divided, but we are a global planet, and the global planet it's alive. So what we do in Brazil impact in the other countries. So we need to look at that. And of course, we have lots of variables impact in this climate change. Like me in the farm, we are in Brazil, so it's a largest country. At the north, we have dry now, the biggest dry for years, and they have lots of problem to produce food, to transportation, lots of kinds of problems too. I'm from the south of Brazil, and now we have at the same time, same day, we have lots of rain, and this rain are impacting the food production too. And every this problem comes from the climate crisis, and we need to look at that because at my farm, for example, I'm lost harvest. So once I have one lettuce to sell at the street market we are part of, now I need to harvest five to sell like one because the vegetables are not growing, and that one that grow are stopped because we have a lot of rain, and it's a problem too. Sometimes we think water is a solution to grow food, but in my case it's a problem. And in the north we have the contrary. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So if I come to you in terms of Botswana, a lot of times, many times in some of the countries, Mali, Botswana, Sierra Leone, uh, the moment people talk about renewable energy, stick to only renewable energy and lighting. and they jump into pay as you go and those, right? Hardly you see an attention because many of these countries have no baggage like the other middle income countries. Oh, do we fight the grid? We don't fight the grid. We've already got a lot of pollution in the agricultural space. Where is the link between energy and agricultural happening in Botswana? Are you seeing attraction or people saying it's too expensive or not going beyond lighting per se?
Yes.
Because which is very critical for Botswana to look at for the next 5 years.
Yes. I think for Botswana, and that is, the same across most of the countries in the region, is like you are saying, most of the time when you talk about renewable energy, they will think solar energy and they will
Right,
think lighting
right,
and charging small gadgets, phones and stuff.
exactly.
But it goes beyond that. There are a couple of renewable energy technologies that has potential in Botswana, like your waste to energy, like where farmers basically can use a cow dung, can use agricultural, bioproduce to, produce a biogas that they can use for, cooking, space heating, and other thermal applications. There's also the biofuels and, of course, solar energy, but in extended scale, like solar water pumping system, solar water heating. And for Botswana, I think the major challenge that we have is cost because those technologies that are very expensive at the moment. Like for example, to install a solar water pumping system to get water from a borehole, that is, let's say 100 meters, you will have to spend something like 4,500 US dollars, which is expensive for an ordinary farm. But the government has since come with incentives and to encourage the uptake of these technologies. At the moment, there's a program whereby a farmer pays 50% of the total, cost of the system. And since the introduction of that, we've been seeing a lot of, farmers and people going into the renewables, um, um, uh, um, installing this system to provide, a storage like refrigeration,
Right.
because farmers, they need to keep the vaccines for the livestock, in a certain condition, and also during transportation, because these farmers and farms are far from towns, they're far from the markets, so they now using solar systems to basically refrigerate and have a cold trucks to get their produce from the farms to the market, and that gives them value because their produce will get to the market still fresh and be able to be sold at a better price. So even the strategy of the country, when it comes to agriculture, because we have really identified that the only way we can change our our story as a country is by investing in agriculture, and we understand and appreciate that we cannot do agriculture like we've been doing it in the past years. Agriculture need energy, and not just energy, clean, sustainable, and
And
affordable.
but for that, I mean, just to give you a peek to the audience here, in the sense that if you look at when people talk about financial sustainability, and in these cases, if you look at the net financial sustainability of California IT sector, IRR, it's negative. It's not positive. We've only talked about one success of the Googles and the Microsoft. Rest are all loss-making organizations. It's negative. But when it comes to countries like Botswana, Mali, Sierra Leone, nobody wants to put innovation money. Oh, I don't trust it. Oh man, this is that. Oh, or I will come and do it. Oh, they don't have capacity, right? This inversion, right? Unless we do not put a lot of innovation resources into countries like Botswana. See, innovation both in terms of technology, business model, finance, and that needs philanthropic capital where your failure rate might be 99%. But for that 1% to succeed, you need to fail 99%. And that's how California came up. 99 things failed for one.
Mm.
Where do you see that capital going to come from? I mean, this is a challenge to all of us here and all potential philanthropic organizations to listen. But you need to keep failure capital into countries like Brazil, Botswana to succeed. What is the existing resources that you're looking at? Because directly people will jump in. Can you make it viable, financially viable?
Yes, I think that, you just like you said it. For us, it's not more on funding. It is more on the technology transfer. It is more on the skill. It is more on education and awareness. because we've been having a lot of donor projects and funding coming in from UNDP, the World Bank, and other institutions, and we have a lot of installations, solar installations, supply gas installation, and it's very sad that as we speak, majority of them are not operational.
Right.
And is the question comes in to say, is the issue of solar or renewable energy cannot work for us as Botswana, or is a problem of maintenance and the knowledge of the people who can basically maintain and take care of these facilities? And the answer to that is that we found that even the technicians that we have, they know little about these technologies. So we need technology transfer. We need education, capacity building, and also to own this technology. Because you see, countries like Botswana and others in the region, we want to be, because we understand that renewable energy technology, they are a global need. It's a global necessity. We need them like yesterday, but we don't only want to be consumers. We want also to participate in developing these systems so that we can, specify them and tailor make them for our own conditions and for our people, so that our people can feel that included. And by so doing, we'll be able now to increase the spectrum. Not only because at the moment, the only benefit that our people enjoy
Right.
is to have energy access.
Right. Right.
But there are
Right.
other, areas
Good.
that are not enjoying, like your green sustainable jobs that come with these technologies, and also the growth of the industry. For Botswana, we are a small country of population of 2.5 million people, and we find that unemployment is one of the most crisis that we have as a country. We have a small industry, but it's through renewable energy technologies that we can, demonopolize and decentralize energy access by using this
Yeah. So
technology.
for me, the one of the biggest threat is donor colonization, which I see very clearly. That unless we break that and democratize it in many ways, development can happen. Coming to, and I said it, not you guys. So don't worry, blame it on me. So question to you is, how do we make sure that in 5 years we don't use the word organic at all? When we mean by farming, it is organic. Right. 150 years ago, it was farming, right? It's like when we say, oh, you run a social enterprise. No, I run an enterprise, the others run anti-social enterprises. Right. So why should we give this tag, which leads to a separate portfolio? How do we institutionalize it in a sense? And you have taken examples. We all talk in silos, and that's the advantage other people take. They are centralized in their thought process. We are unfortunately decentralized in our thought process, right? And that is why we are. So, how do we institutionalize the work that you're doing?
So Brazil is the largest, the biggest consumer of pesticides in the world. We use 10 kilos per hectare of pesticides. It's 3 times more than United States. That's so much. And we have 10 of the most selling pesticides in Brazil. 5 of them are prohibited, forbidden in Europe. And we have lots of research that prove that these 5 pesticides are forbidden because they have a problem with cancer, fetal malformation, Parkinson, diabetes. And so I have two problems here in Brazil. One of them is deforestation. Second one is pesticides. So if I look for this biggest problem, the solution is plant forest and stop use pesticide. And to me, it's I always think about that question you say, why I, like a organic farmer, need to prove and pay to have my organic label, but I'm doing the right way of organic, of farmer, of food production. But I need to prove for population that I'm right. But we need to change it. And to me, we need lots of policies. We need the world looking for the food system uh, production. We need lots of change on that, and look that agroecology and agroforestry are the way, because we need to work with nature because nature knows what they are doing. And the people, what they did, they go in the opposite way of nature to grow food. And now what we are doing, we are back to the way we came. That is natural, that is agroforestry, that is agroecology. We are looking for the people that know what they are doing, like indigenous people and traditional communities. And we need to give more voice to these people. So COP, I'm happy that we have this food system pavilion at COP. I'm happy that I listen lots of colleagues, farmers talking about their experience. But we need more. We need not just a pavilion. We need big, big events at COP because this is the center. This is the base. And if you need, we want to change this climate crisis. We need to put farmers in the tables that are the most important space of dialogues, and we need to show them that it's possible. So show that agroforestry, agroecology experience can have results, and we can harvest food in this way of to produce. This is what I think. Give voice, give space, listen more than talk. Listen the farm. Give eyes to them, and they know what they are doing. They can share knowledge, and we can be inspired and go to action. Because next COP, I want to come here. I don't want to see more problems. I want to see what has happened in this year, what we did in this year to change it, and not to think about solution because we have lots of solution. Now we need to go to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, final question to you. You're the Minister of Agri and Energy of Botswana. One ask from the stakeholders before you leave on the 12th of December. Who is your primary stakeholder, and what will you ask them here before you leave on 12th?
Um, I think the question that I will, pose to it will be, um, Africa is so vast as a continent.
Right.
We have a large, area of farming land, and our soils are fertile. But how come, when it comes to people who are mostly affected by hunger and famine, it's us Africans?
Right.
That question needs to be answered because, and we see agriculture as our only way out. So what you are asking for is it's investment into agriculture, it's education, capacity building, and the new farming methods and principles that we need to improve our agricultural produce. And energy cannot go mentioned when it comes to commercializing and improving agriculture. So that is why we are calling for renewables and renewable energy technologies, because they give hope to the farming community in terms of socio-economic development and environmental and sustainable aspects. So we are saying help us by investing, and most importantly technology transfer and education in the area of renewable, because there is no agriculture without energy access.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You are the Minister for Latin America. What would you expect?
Oh my God. We need to share knowledge between the countries, and we need to put at the table the good experience and put money too. And we need to go to action. That's the way. We can talk a lot, we can provide laws, we can do a lot of things. But what I see is we need to go to action. We need to support that actions, and then we can gonna have results. So if I'm minister, I will do actions. And one thing more, sorry. Now in Brazil, we are so close to approve a law that flexibilize a lot the buy and the use of pesticides. It's so terrible that, because how I say, we are the biggest using the pesticide in the world. We have this place that's not good. Now we're gonna approve more flexibility to use more and more pesticides. So this is a way to, because we need to block that. We need to stop using pesticides. We have people being sick. We have people die. We have animals in the nature are dying. So we need to have good laws to not flexibilize it. We need to block it.
Thank you so much. We are nearly out of time, and I think one thing all four people were very pleasant. Only my request to you, sir, is that please change your. You're such a smiling person. Please change your photograph to sorry, and exactly. And then in the last, I tell you when he mentioned the real. See, when he said there are a group of real engineers. You know that if I'm an engineer, but the problem with me is that you tell me to draw the thermodynamics of a car, I will write all the equations. You show me a car, I will run away. So the difference between him and us, he's a real engineer. I'm just a person with an engineering degree. So, and that's what we did in the world. Thank you so much for being in the panel, and hopefully we move this and with all the positiveness that all four of you have shown. Thanks so much. Thanks.